Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast. I'm Ryan, your solo host for the day. Today I am really excited to bring you an interview I did with Felix Mantz about a crazy adventure he went on this August, driving from London all the way to Mongolia, going through places like Iran, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, on part of something called the Mongol Rally, which is an event that happens every year as a bunch of people from around the world get together, buy crappy cars, and head off through Europe and Central Asia on really the trip of a lifetime. Amanda and I first met Felix about a year and a half ago in the summer of 2014 at a hostel in Lima, Peru. And we stayed up late one night talking about basically everything imaginable. It was one of those fantastic conversations that you get in a hostel that you don't encounter too often other places, where you can talk about things like ayahuasca and life and the meaning of life and anarchy and Bitcoin, all in the space of a couple hours. And I really loved having the chance to catch up with Felix and hear more about the Mongol Rally that he went on, traveling across 17,000 kilometers, 17 countries over just over a month. And he shares some amazing stories about border crossings into Iran, car crashes, getting your car stuck in a river. And be warned, listening may have you wanting to make some plans for next summer to go on an adventure like this one. If you want to find out more about the Mongol Rally, you should really check out the YouTube page. They have some fantastic videos. And anything else that we talk about during the conversation, you can find links to on theworldwanderers.com in the show notes. Hope you enjoy.
All right. I'm really happy to have you on the podcast, Felix. The reason that we have Felix on today is to talk about an adventure he went on in, I guess, August to September.
Yep, that was it. 6 weeks.
Driving 17,000 kilometers from London to Mongolia. And I remember when you posted something on Facebook about going to Mongolia, and I saw it and was like, wow, that's really cool. Going to Mongolia, that's exciting. And I obviously didn't think you were driving there. So like a couple of weeks later, I saw like another post and you were in Turkey. And then it clicked that you were actually driving there. And I was like, what the fuck? Who drives to Mongolia? But I kind of dug into the Mongol Rally YouTube channel. And yeah, it looks like an amazing adventure. So how did you, so first of all, what is the Mongol Rally?
Okay, the Mongol Rally is a organized, unorganized kind of vehicular disarray that kind of gets about 100 cars from London to a finish line in the middle of nowhere. In Russia, actually, is where we ended up this year. The whole idea is that the only thing that's organized is our starting point at the beginning and our destination in the end, but we get pretty much no support along the way. We have to come up with our own route. We have to come up with our own schedule, and kind of see how we actually get there. And things start to, or your schedule kind of starts to disintegrate quite quickly as soon as you hit the stans in Central Asia, where things just don't quite work as fluidly as you'd expect.
And so you went through 17 countries. I think you posted
yes.
that. What were so? Other than like the European ones, once you get to Turkey, what did you go through?
Okay, so from Turkey, we went straight into Iran, then across Iran a bit, north into Turkmenistan, across that into Uzbekistan, and then straight up to Kazakhstan and via Russia into Mongolia. And then the final finish line was in Ulan-Ude. That's by Lake Baikal, by Irkutsk in Russia.
Nice. Like, yeah. That's a lot of interesting stamps on the passport.
Definitely.
Probably
definitely.
Like day to day, you don't meet many people who have gone to Turkmenistan or Uzbekistan.
No, you really don't. Which for some of the countries, I have to say, it's kind of understandable. They probably don't have that much to offer for travelers, but others are just massively overlooked and are well worth a visit.
So how did you first hear about the Mongol Rally, and then how did you come around to deciding to actually participate in it?
I heard about it about this time last year when a colleague of mine told me about this trip just as a fleeting comment that he did a couple of years ago. And I just stopped the entire conversation and quizzed him for the next half an hour exactly how he did it, what this rally was and what it involved, because I thought it was an absolutely great idea and great adventure. It's difficult to say what got me to do it. I think I had a collapsed lung a bit earlier in 2014, and I think part of that kind of made me reevaluate life a little bit and made me a bit more adventurous and out to live life to the fullest sort of thing. So when I then heard about this opportunity to do something stupid like that, I just jumped on it straight away.
So, let's talk more about the collapsed lung reevaluating life thing. That sounds interesting. What it was like, I need to be doing, like, living bigger, doing more adventurous things.
Yeah, being a bit less responsible, being a bit more in the moment and living less for the future sort of thing, because, well, you don't know how much longer you have. And I was 24 at the time, and it was a bit of I don't want to call it a wake-up call because that's such a cliche term, but it did make me kind of just change my outlook on life a little bit, and maybe a bit more of a funner person probably, and a bit more of a stupid person as well.
Did it, like, so it was a pretty serious medical issue?
Yeah, probably not quite life-threatening, but enough to really be incapacitated and kind of more of a wake-up call than something that was actually very serious. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was enough for me to subsequently sign up to that, and also a bunch of other stupid things like running 2 Tough Mudders consecutively, and I don't know what other challenges I set myself over the last couple of months.
Nice. Yeah, that's actually feeling. Last night I was watching a movie. Have you heard of Fault in Our Stars?
Oh yeah, the boy with the girl with cancer and the boy who falls in love with her.
Yeah, who also has cancer. And spoiler alert, right. He dies. So, and then she dies eventually too. But anyways, yeah, you get that feeling when you watch something like that, like. Especially as you're doing, like, day-to-day things that are enjoyable, but maybe not. Like, when you're in a routine, everything comes a little bit monotonous, and it makes you kind of lust for, like, something, like, bigger and something that makes you feel, like, really alive.
Exactly. So if you're looking for something to shake up your routine and to be on your toes for 6 weeks, the Mongol Rally is definitely a great thing to do.
So when you committed to doing it, had you made a long search for someone to do it with, or?
It was pretty obvious actually who I would do it with. That's an old school friend of mine. We've been traveling a couple of times already. This isn't the guy who was with me when we met in Peru, by the way. This is someone else. And we were meant to go on a little road trip around Eastern Europe, just at the time as my lung collapsed. So I had to cancel that and felt really bad for him because he had his holiday booked in. So it was the obvious thing that if I would do this big long car trip, it would have to be with him. And there was a bit of coordination involved actually in the beginning to get everyone, like to get the dates to line up properly. He's just working on his own startup and wasn't sure how much holiday he could take. For me, I wasn't sure if I would get the time off work either. So from my point of view, it was pretty straightforward. If I wouldn't get the time off, I would quit. But because he's working on his own startup, he didn't quite have that make it or break it attitude. But in the end, everything aligned. We compromised a bit in that I had a week in Europe in the beginning by myself or with another friend along, and then he joined me from Istanbul onwards. That way he didn't have to take quite as much time off, but he was still there for the main rally bits.
And so does everyone buy a shitty car in preparation for the trip?
Yeah, most people do. Some people spend a lot of time on their cars, actually, and really either pimp them out to make them rally ready, which kind of spoils the fun a bit, to be honest. The idea is that it's a shit car and it breaks down along the way. And others go really elaborate, do it in an old Morris Traveller, like a wooden framed car, an old English car. It's pretty exciting. And yeah, those people are the definitely the ones that are more mechanically talented among the teams. I definitely couldn't have gotten a car like that to the finish line. As for us, we actually had what was it? I think it was Kevin's cousin. This is my friend who I did the rally with. He was just selling his car, and it was an old Ford Fiesta. It was a tiny bit bigger than the official limits or the official requirements, but we got it for free from the family in the end when they heard what we were doing with it. The car didn't have a lot of value anyway, so they gifted it to us, which was very nice of them. Big shout out to that side. And it worked perfectly for us. Like, the car was in pretty decent condition, and well, yeah, it got us there in the end with a lot of hassle along the way, to be fair.
Did either of you guys have mechanical skills? Nothing.
No, not really. We'd say we're probably both not completely incapable with our hands, but we don't have any practical car mechanical experience.
So was that a worry when you were starting out? Like, you'd break down and you'd have no way of fixing it?
Honestly, I wasn't worried at any point in the trip, really. It's kind of the attitude you go with it. You know you're going to break down, so it's not something that you worry about, because kind of when you break down, you'll play it by ear. Then you'll see what happens, and I'm sure we'll walk through it in a bit. All the different crashes and problems we had along the way, they all managed to get fixed. At times, we had to throw a couple of $100s at people to help us out in the middle of nowhere. But other than that cost, I think it was actually fairly easy going.
So when you were about to set out, like night before, did you have any anxiety, any nerves, or was it all just excitement?
Of course, I was nervous. I think anyone would lie if they say they weren't nervous before setting off on a big trip like that. I think for me, the biggest thing were border crossings, land borders. The couple that I did in my life so far, I've had quite bad experiences, and I was nervous about driving a car through these different countries that at times have quite strict regulations as well. They make you jump through a lot of hoops at the border. There are a lot of hidden costs. But I think after having the first hiccup already crossing into Turkey, because we didn't have some documents that we needed, and after just waiting and talking to the guy, talking to him about our trip, he just waved us through in the end, despite not having the correct documents. After that, my nerves were calmed, and I knew whatever would happen now for the border crossings, at least, that would be easy.
And so you start off in London and then drive through Europe. Was that all smooth sailing?
For us, yes, but there are quite a lot of other teams that already broke down barely after the starting point here. So within Europe is, because it's kind of just covering distance in fairly like unspectacular territory by the grand scheme of the rally. The organizers planned a couple of parties along the way, which are always a couple of days away. So they give you some sort of waypoints as long as you're still in Europe, sort of all the way across to Romania. And then the teams tend to split into the ones that take the northern route through Russia, that take the central route, take a ferry across, or the ones that take the southern route through Iran.
Yeah, so I guess you do have some route planning in advance, eh?
You have to, just because of visa timing. Because a lot of the places will only give you a very short time frame that you're allowed to visit them. For example, in Turkmenistan, we had officially just a transit visa, which gave us 5 days, I think, to make our way across, which is fine. It's a fairly small country and there isn't too much to see. But then there are other visa dates after that which are quite tight, and you do have to be a bit diligent. And there were a couple of days where we had very long drives. I forget what it was. I think it was something like a 27-hour journey or so from Esfahan in the center of Iran all the way up to Darvaza in the center of Turkmenistan, which we did in one night, basically. One night and one day. Just
driving straight the entire time?
Yep. Taking shifts of about 3 hours driving through the night.
Wow.
And swapping with the other person sleeping, which you really don't want to do on Turkmen roads. They have a fairly good infrastructure in their capital city, but as soon as you leave that, as soon as you go into the countryside, into the desert, there's just not a lot there. The road is tarmac, but it has huge potholes, which are very sharp corners. Camels free roaming the streets. Big trucks that don't what's the word, dim their lights when they approach you. They just always keep them on full beam, on high beam. So it's quite rough driving at times.
Yeah, it sounds really treacherous.
Yeah, it does. And there were a couple of very uncomfortable situations. Either late night driving like that, long hours, trying to rush to make sure we don't overstay our welcome, overstay our visa. Other times when we were stuck on our car on the back of a lorry for 700 kilometers or so. And what I didn't quite appreciate is that the actual loading bay of a lorry in the back is really, really hardly sprung. And the suspension of our car itself was pretty much compressed all the way as well because of the straps holding our car down. We just felt every single bump. And
so you guys were sitting in the car while it was on the back of the truck.
Because the passenger compartment in the front was full with the truck driver and his family. So we're at the back of this. And Kevin and I are both fairly tall people, and a Ford Fiesta is not a very spacious car. So we were hitting our head against the ceiling whenever we hit a bigger bump, of which there are many in the Gobi Desert. So between that and like the night drives, there were a couple of very uncomfortable things, but I think that's kind of part of the adventure. It's what I expected. So you kind of just have to man up.
Yeah. It's like one of those things that's like a cool experience. Like if you were doing it for like 50 kilometers, it's like, we're sitting in a car on the back of a truck in wherever, Turkmenistan. That's cool. But 700 kilometers that's a bit long.
It's very long. Yeah. It was about 10 hours, I think, that it took us. Which was overnight as well. So Kevin and I were really excited. Yes, we could catch up on some sleep while the other guy was driving us around. No, we could not.
When you were planning your route, did you choose the Iran-Stan route just because it's more adventurous as opposed to going through Russia?
Yes, basically. The Russian route I never even considered once. That was just far too boring in my eyes. You can do it in quite a shorter time span as well. It only takes about 5 days to cover the same distance that took us probably 2 weeks or so if you just drive via Russia because of good roads. But that would miss a lot of the really interesting countries which this rally gave you an opportunity to kind of visit and tick off your list, if anything. So that's definitely why we went through the southern, or discarded the northern route, shall we say. And then the central option is what a lot of teams do that are either Canadian, American, or British, because you're not allowed into Iran without being accompanied by a guide. So that's quite easy for me and my friend. We're both German. So we were able to just drive through Iran without any issue, more or less. They just waved us in, were incredibly friendly to us along the way. But the teams there were a couple of teams that had British nationals that went through Iran, and they had to be accompanied by a guide, which isn't a major hassle, but it's just another cost to keep in mind. So I think it's something like $100 a day in that order of magnitude. Wow. So if you want 6-7 days in Iran, it makes sense to share a guide with a couple of other teams. And that's what happened in the Facebook group, actually, which is one of the most vital things of this entire rally. So to talk about that a bit more, a lot of people always ask me why I paid I think 600-ish pounds to this company to sign up for this trip when they don't really provide anything other than a few parties in Europe, which are definitely not worth 600 pounds. It's all about the community and the feeling of doing it with others. And that really came together in the Facebook group for this year's rally. There's a specific one for every year, where as we're going along, exchanging stories, tips, advice, coordinating meetups in different cities, making sure that you can sort of drive in convoy, simple things like comparing packing lists before the trip, even just to make sure you're not the stupid team that forgot their jack and can't change his spare tire or something like that. So that was a really valuable resource, and that together with the community feel, I think is definitely worth the sign-up fee.
Yeah, and I'd imagine spending time with a friend for, how many days did you end up being on the road for? 30?
Yeah, good question. I think something like 37 maybe.
Yes.
Can't quite remember.
So it must be nice to get those opportunities to interact with like a larger group of people and not feel kind of like isolated.
Yeah, that's true. You're still much closer to the guy that you're traveling with, of course, but it does make for a nice change if you have some other drinking companions that also speak English.
So were there a lot of days when you were traveling with a couple other cars, a couple other people doing the trip?
Yeah, the majority of the days. Honestly, probably 80% of the time we spent convoying with other cars, with other teams, and having walkie-talkies and just keeping the banter alive between cars was so much fun.
Nice. Yeah, I imagine, because it would feel like it'd also be like a little bit safer, obviously, because there's some stretches where you're really like out in the middle of nowhere, right?
Yep. That being said, the route overall is actually very safe. Couple of the one iffy point that we passed, which is where we got into some trouble with the military as well, is the border between Turkey and Iran, just because of ISIS at the moment and PKK as Kurdish militants. It's not the safest area in the world. And actually driving through eastern Turkey, talking to people about our route, we had people draw skulls and crossbones on the map at various different areas in eastern Turkey, telling us not to go there, and making gun sounds, just communicating in any way possible that if we go there, we get shot, and it's bad for us. But we kind of skirted through just north of those areas and made it through fine in the end. But when we got to the border crossing into Iran, we were a bit silly, to be honest. This is something that we didn't quite appreciate how much of a risky area it was. And that we arrived at the border, but it was just half an hour or so after it closed. It was a very small border, not the main crossing that a lot of the other teams that went into Iran went through. And the place looked desolate, sort of trash fires burning on the outside. We were already thinking, what just happened here? Did the place get hit or something? Was there a raid? But after driving around the area of the border station for half an hour or so, we kind of got comfortable and thought, you know what, let's just spend the night here. And
so there's like random piles of stuff burning around, and you're just like, this looks like a nice place. It's nice and warm at least.
Exactly. Well, we try to stay upwind from the fumes at least. But sure enough, after we drive around, and this is a beautiful valley with the sun setting in the background. And there are a couple of like watchtowers up on the hills, but we didn't really make too much of it. Take some pictures of everything, and then think, okay, let's find a nice place to camp. When all of a sudden sirens go off in this valley, and these two armored cars are coming our way from one of what looked like a very abandoned checkpoint or base on one of the mountain sides of the valley. They come charging down to us at the bottom of the valley where the actual border crossing is, where we were hanging out looking for a place to camp. So we had one like armored personnel carrier that fit maybe 16, 20 troops, and another more of a light assault vehicle kind of thing with a electric turret on the top.
Whoa.
With a remote control turret, and they were rushing down at us. Incredibly loud sirens. One of the cars kind of bypasses us a bit, and we start laughing. Oh, look, they can't even find us. They drove the wrong way on the road.
And are you like outside your tent at this point in time?
Yeah, we just had the cars parked. We didn't even have our tents out yet. We were just scouting this grass patch, basically. So to note also, it's us and another Team Fritz, who we convoyed with for quite a while through Turkey and Iran. So we were 2 cars there, 4 guys. When all of a sudden the smaller of the 2 cars, the one with a gun on the top, basically stops short in front of us, and you can see it. The suspension compressed from it braking and kind of jiggles a bit as it comes to a halt. And as soon as it's completely idle, you can see the turret readjust just a tiny bit, so it's perfectly centered on us. That was quite a sobering moment. And that's also when we realized that the other car that we thought couldn't find us in the first place actually dropped off some soldiers further along the way. And before we know it, we were surrounded by about 15 Turkish soldiers holding us at gunpoint and shouting at us basically to not move. So after we all soiled ourselves and managed to gather our nerves again, the officer who was in charge of the squad, I guess, that came to pick us up, was very good. Quickly took off his bulletproof vest, put down his gun, was de-escalating, talking to us, and they clearly realized we weren't up to any trouble and were quite nice to us. Did a bit of a passport control and then took us into their base with them. So Kevin was driving our car, and one of the soldiers got in the car with him. I got to drive in one of the armored cars, one with the gun, which we could see was trailing on our cars, driving behind them, and we drove in convoy up the mountainside again into the base, where the sort of commander of the kind of area came by, who spoke better English, interviewed us a bit what we're doing, why we're doing it, what the rally is about, made us delete all the pictures from the checkpoint and the area from our cameras. Fair enough, which is the reason they picked us up in the first place. That and kind of trespassing in border areas that are kind of in a bit of a dodgy part of the world at the moment. Subsequently, they invited us to stay and spend the night with them in the barracks, kind of as a sort of security measure, that we don't get into any trouble or don't get hurt. And sure enough, that night a bomb went off a couple of miles away from where we were. So it was quite good and quite nice that they took us in. We got fed. We played backgammon with the soldiers in the courtyard in the morning. They all signed our car, signed various pieces of clothing and exchanged gifts, sort of thing. And then in the morning, they even smoothed the border crossing for us once it opened up again. And we then also found out that just arranged for us to skip the queue.
Oh, okay.
And go through quicker.
Wow, that is an amazing story. What was going through your head as these, trucks with guns on them are rushing towards you?
Oh shit! we fucked up this time.
And you thought of running at all?
Oh no! That would have been the worst idea imaginable.
But did you have that instinct at all, like the flight or fight? No.
Not really. To be honest, I was fairly collected about it. One of the guys from the other team had the idea to, as the cars were approaching, to make the point that we're not running, actually take out our tent and throw it on the ground quickly, pretend like we were just setting it up, which was quite a good idea, I thought, and we went for it at the time just to show that, well, we're no threat, we just want to camp here. And to be honest, at the end of the day, it was the Turkish army. They respect human rights. It wasn't anything that we were afraid of being shot unnecessarily. So as long as, or kind of with that in mind, we were saying to each other as they were coming down the hill at us, just stay calm, we'll see what they want, we'll cooperate with everything, and it all went down very smoothly in the end.
So is ISIS actually in Turkey?
I don't actually know where they're at the moment, but they're just south of Turkey. Yeah. Between Syria and Iraq. And there's a border with Syria, Turkey, Iran. That's sort of a triangle where it's all kicking off quite a lot as well. And Iraq, sorry. But it's more that at the time, just 5 days before, the Turkish government authorized airstrikes on ISIS in the area, which also hit some of the PKK, the Kurdish militants, who want Kurdistan to break off into their own country, which was more or less on purpose, is the general understanding. So therefore, the Kurdish militants, they flamed up a bit, and they're further north as well. Kurdistan, that region, it's not a recognized country as such, but that stretches through all of eastern Turkey, small parts of western Iran, and northern Iraq.
Yeah, I remember hearing like the mainstream news is like Turkey starts airstrikes on ISIS, but then you like start reading the body and it's like, oh, they're actually bombing the PKK, which are the people who are fighting ISIS. So they're bombing the people fighting ISIS. Exactly.
They just took it as an excuse. Well, one theory is that they took it as an excuse to just have a couple of strikes against these militants, which the government doesn't really like in Turkey. So that's why, despite not being in ISIS territory, there were tensions flaring up further in the north as well, and that's the conflict that we kind of got into.
And so that was your second border crossing of the trip, right?
Our second big one.
Yeah. And then after Iran, did anything of comparable interest happen?
Not in terms of military or police or anything like that. There are a couple of situations where, or we've heard this from other teams actually, that didn't happen to us, but police, especially in Kazakhstan, asking for bribes, and then as you're negotiating over the bribes, which start ludicrously high, they'll often go and like unlock their holster of their gun just as a bit of a demonstration tool. But all these bribe negotiations were always really lighthearted. At least I thought so.
So I think you posted that you had 6 bribes or something.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Tell me about bribe story.
A couple of them are very easy, and it's just us driving past the checkpoint, the police waving us down, stopping us, searching us, asking how much money we have on us. Kind of have to show them our wallets, and then they point at stuff and say, "Oh, souvenir." Point at the $10 bill, and we're like, "Oh, no souvenir. We need money." And then in the end, you settle and you give them a $1 bill each or something. So it's important to have small denominations with you, actually, for that sort of stuff. So those are the sort of bribes which were quite fun to negotiate, because both parties knew that it was just outrageous what they were asking for, basically. So we could be quite harsh in our approach and say, "Bribe, no, you stupid, no way." And then a couple of other situations where we broke traffic regulations that were either incredibly strict, that no local adhered to, or that we didn't know. So, for example, you have to drive with your lights on in Kazakhstan. Or there are a couple of stretches of road in the middle of the nowhere where everyone drives 100 kilometers an hour, and the actual speed limit is 30 or so. And then around a bend, there'll be a police checkpoint with a radar control. So we got caught by a couple of those. And the normal penalty that the locals would have to pay is, say, $3. When they see us, they write down a huge number on a piece of paper, which is something like $130 at one time. So the negotiating starts, and you settle on a bribe of something like $10 per cop or so, and that's when you head off. That being said, other teams, maybe who either had less cash on hand or who had more time, simply waited it out, and very often you can get away with giving them a can of beans or a bottle of vodka. Or just waiting longer, pretending like you're stupid, you have no idea what they're talking about, and after a while they'll get fed up with you and just wave you on. So the whole bribe thing was quite fun. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, how does it make you feel about like coming back to the UK afterwards and like being in kind of well functioning society? I missed the bribe thing. It was a very fluent way to get out of stuff. I wish I could do that over here. Yeah, that's one of the things about like a lot of the countries where you kind of technically have less freedom. Like in South America, for example, you do actually have more like practical freedom because you can buy your way out of all these problems that you can't in other places.
As long as you have money, that is.
Yeah.
Yep.
So long as you have money, you can have freedom. But if you don't, you're in trouble.
Oh, that's not a very healthy view of the world. It would be like that everywhere. Only the rich are free.
Yeah. Well, it'd be better if those rules didn't exist in the first place. But
now, didn't we have a really late night conversation once about anarcho-capitalism?
Yeah, that's so for everyone listening. We got to know each other on the roof of a hostel in Lima talking about anarcho-capitalism. Which, if you're not familiar with, you should go check out the Wikipedia page for.
Yeah, pretty interesting ideas on government, and kind of in line with that, I guess, in a cynical way, of course.
Yeah, I don't know.
This is your topic here. I was very drunk at the time as well. I hardly remember anything.
Crossing borders in Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, that was all pretty straightforward.
Yeah, after the first couple of borders, you figure out what happens. They tend to separate the driver from all the passengers, and you have to go through different routes. The driver has to do all the paperwork for the car as well, and the passenger just goes through a much quicker immigration process. They'll generally want to inspect your car, which they make a big deal out of, and then very often will tick it off before your boot even fully opened. Although sometimes they do make you search stuff and throw quite a lot of stuff through an X-ray machine every now and then. They'll have dogs at most of the borders. Other than that, it's just a bit of a faff to figure out what station you have to go to, because English isn't very well spoken at most of them. So you're kind of stuck there thinking, oh, do you have the right stamp now? And then you'll get shouted at, no, go over there, get another stamp. And you go over there and they give you a stamp, but it's not the right one. It's the stamp you need to get the stamp that you actually need from another station. So you kind of have to jump through all the bureaucratic hoops, which at time can take quite a long time and be quite nerve-wracking if you haven't slept well before or driven through a night, basically. So I think we had border crossings that were over in about an hour, which is really quick. And some where we spent 6 hours or so.
Wow.
6 hours.
Sorry,
continue. 6 hours, 6 hours from one country to the next. Because every land border will always consist of a check-out and a check-in, with a bit of no man's land in the middle. Where we actually had dinner in the no man's land between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. We got through the border quite late. We made it out of Uzbekistan, and we thought the Kazakh side had shut. So we were hanging out with a bunch of truck drivers there, sharing route ideas on how to best get through Kazakhstan into Russia, and cooking our dinner in the headlights of the truck behind us, sort of thing. Sharing some ready meals with each other was very nice, actually. But then that's actually another bribe situation where we were told to put a couple of dollar bills in our passports and hand them to the guys on the Kazakh side. And they very quickly let us in after that.
So these were the truck drivers who told you about that trick?
The truck drivers encouraged it. Now, I think it was actually the guard who came to us and said something we didn't understand, and then the truck drivers made it clear to us what was happening or was required of us.
Did anyone speak English? Or did these truck drivers have like a rudimentary understanding?
Quite a few spoke German, actually. That was something that really surprised me along the trip. The first time it hit me was in Romania, where I picked up a hitchhiker as I was by myself for a couple of days, who was also a truck driver, but he spoke pretty decent German just from driving across Europe and having a lot of family that emigrated to Germany a while ago, and therefore they kind of exchanged languages. And that trend continued a bit, actually, going throughout. So that was quite nice.
Do you think it's because so many people want to immigrate to Germany, and then is that why that language has a bit more appeal for people?
Yeah, I guess so. Either that they want to do it themselves, or that their family members or friends already have, and they went out to visit them for a couple of months, that sort of thing. We had that story every now and then. So there were quite a few people, or more people than in other parts of the world, at least, that spoke German along the way. Other than that, English, at least very basic, was fairly common.
Yeah, that must have been a very pleasant experience to realize, oh wow, I can actually communicate with people.
Yeah, it's a shame every now and then when you can't share stories or talk to the extent that you'd actually like to. So we had these two language books with us, one like a Russian phrase book and one was a Farsi phrase book, and they both proved so helpful. Wish we had brought more for the more specific languages, but most of the stans, being former like USSR territories, they all spoke Russian or understood at least some Russian, especially the older people. So we used that phrase book to, for about 6 hours, communicate with one of our mechanics just about his life, as there was a power cut and they couldn't work on our car at the time. And we were sitting there on the floor having vodka shots, being fed by his wife and smoking shisha. It was great. But it's those sort of situations where a phrase book has proved so helpful, even if it's just pointing at phrases. What do you do for fun? And then he'll go and flick through the book for 5 minutes and point at gun and boar, which implies hunting or something like that.
Wow. Where did you find like which country did you find you had the best interactions with locals?
Probably Iran. It's just such an open country, at least from the people that we've met, which doesn't associate themselves with the government. We've met quite a few people who were incredibly welcoming. We got stopped by a random car of girls in the middle of a highway. They kind of indicated us to pull over just so that they could take a picture of us and post it on their Instagram because it was such a novelty that white guys were there. No one had ever seen that. People offered us food out of the side of their car. It was great, basically. Just for the people alone, Iran was such a welcome, friendly country. It was incredible.
So in Iran, are there hardly any Europeans and Westerners?
That's the impression I got. Yeah, there's didn't see any other Westerner while we were there, other than in the museum in Tehran. To be fair, which is the one main tourist hub.
Yeah,
but even in big sites down in Esfahan, in big religious areas or big mosques, we didn't see that many tourists. I think I saw 2 or 3 around there. Thinking about it again now, but very, very few.
Yeah, I guess you hear such negative things about Iran, not about like the actual place, but about like, Iran, nuclear this, blah, 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 that maybe, and obviously, so it's hard to go there as a Canadian, an American, or a Brit. So a lot of, maybe it just, all the perception doesn't match up with reality.
Definitely not when it comes to the people that we've met. Of course, I'm sure, as with every country, there'll be some crazies. But overall, the people that we met don't seem to be too keen on the government, or at least, shall we say, have different ideals, and are very, very much westernized. Like, picture sort of a girl with bright red lipstick, round, mirrored Ray-Ban sunglasses in high heels, walking down the street, and then all you have to do is add their kind of uniform, they call it themselves, which just hides the lines a bit, and have a headscarf that sits probably just about on the crown of their head in the back, barely covering anything, just out of compliance reasons. That's sort of the image of most of the Iranis that we had.
And you'd go back?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And of the other countries in the Central Europe region, would you go back to any?
So Central Asia.
Central Asia.
Yep. Go back to Uzbekistan, just because Samarkand, as sort of the old heart of the Silk Road place, was so rich in culture, and we were behind schedule at the time, and my Uzbek visa was running out in 2 days, so we just had to leg it through. We didn't have any time to spend there. I'd love to go back to Uzbekistan. Turkmenistan, I'm okay with having seen once. It had a weird vibe, the place. I didn't gel with it very much. There's also not too much to see, to be honest. There's a very bizarre capital city, which our travel guide described as Pyongyang meets Las Vegas, or Pyongyang meets Dubai, I think. Because everything is really wide. There's marble everywhere. All windows are mirrored. But the whole place looks pretty deserted, except for an army of street cleaners who keep the place spotless. It's boiling hot, so everyone's just inside all the time. It didn't feel inhabited. It felt very alien. So not too keen on going back there, to be honest. Having seen it once is enough for me to get the experience. But I'd love to spend more time in Iran, again, because it's a rally and you're driving through. You don't have enough. It's not a proper Iran holiday. You don't have enough time to actually see everything in the country that you want to see. And yeah, similar for Uzbekistan. I think those are the 2 main places that I want to go back to.
And what is it about Uzbekistan?
Maybe partly coming to Uzbekistan from Turkmenistan was very refreshing, because it just felt more open about everything. That being said, actually, I think at the time Turkmenistan ranked second lowest on the World Press Freedom Index, the only country that's lower is North Korea.
Wow.
So to put it into perspective a bit, that's where the strange vibes came from. It was just its own community, and Uzbekistan just felt culturally incredibly rich. And yeah, just it's difficult to say. Sometimes you just arrive at a place and you feel at home, and sometimes you arrive at a place and you kind of just want to leave it straight away again.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe leaving it straight away is a bit harsh, but you just don't really click with it. So that's kind of the feeling that I had from Turkmenistan, and not from Uzbekistan.
Yeah, I imagine the second least free country in the world doesn't seem like a very fun place to be.
Yep. That being said, North Korea is still on my to travel list as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to happen next year, the year after maybe.
What makes you want to go to North Korea?
The part of it is probably the novelty of it. The opportunity to go at the moment, which we didn't have for a very long time historically, and who knows how much longer we'll have the opportunity to go. The ability to see a culture that's so different or so closed off. I'm very much aware of the show that they put on for tourists as they go, and it's kind of a similar thing to what you would have to go through for Iran, and that you'd have to stay in a group when you go to North Korea. But I don't know, it's just the idea of having actually been there or seen it is really exciting for me.
Yeah, and it would serve as kind of like a contrast to other things, which could make you more grateful for not being there.
Yeah.
What do you think about like the idea of supporting the regime by visiting as a tourist? Do you think that does that come into play at all?
I've been challenged by that, or people have challenged me with that thought already. I would argue that tourism is such a minimal part of their income; it's not significant. But I can see where people are coming from. At the end of the day, being able to go and see it, I think, and spreading how it looked back over here, just by being able to have a first-hand account, probably even worth more than the arguably minuscule additional damage that I'm doing by giving them my couple of £100 for the guided tour for a few days.
Yeah,
I think I'd say I'm fine with it overall.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know what the perspective of like. Well, I guess so. As a tourist, you probably don't get to interact with the everyday North Korean person very much. But yeah, it'd be interesting what their perspective on the tourists that they do see is.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's off track a bit. That's just my hypothetical travel plans in the future.
Just want to get the bottom two checked off your list.
Basically. Just so I can enjoy being at the top.
And so you leave Uzbekistan, go through Kazakhstan.
Yeah.
Did you actually go to Mongolia?
Yes. So the trip takes us through Kazakhstan, pretty much just south to north. And then Kazakhstan and Mongolia don't share a border themselves. So you have to go via Russia for a tiny bit. Then you hit Mongolia, and that's such a contrast. Basically, as soon as you're on the other side of the border, the roads stop. There's no tarmac anymore. You're just driving over these like corrugated desert tracks, which you have to drive over quite quickly so that you glide from bump to bump rather than dropping in all of the little ones, which makes control quite hard on sand. If you're going 60, 70 kilometers an hour and there's all of a sudden a bend or a dune or a hole or something, and you try to steer when all you're doing is gliding over the tops of these little things, you have no traction basically. So we had a couple of occasions where we hit sand dunes and had to dig ourselves out and get towed out again. But yeah, we definitely made it through Mongolia. It's kind of, the rally's kind of split into three parts, probably, to zoom out a bit. There's a part within Europe, which is parties and fun, everything's fairly easy driving wise. Then you have the stans in Central Asia, that bit which is the roads are getting worse, but it's still tarmacked generally. And And then when you hit Mongolia, that's when the real adventure starts, where you have very long stretches without any roads whatsoever. You have to cross rivers. We got stuck in a river. That was nice.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. I saw something about highest water level in car, bottom of the steering wheel.
Exactly.
So you were trying to drive across a river.
Yeah, we were convoying with a Nissan Micra at the time. They drove ahead, got about 3/4 of the way to the deepest spot, stalled, but their engine started again, which is a miracle and never happens. So they were able to drive out by themselves on the other side. And well, then they stood there waiting for us. So it was our go. We looked at it, and the water was, I don't know, maybe half a meter or so high. It wasn't excessive. It was doable. So we give it our all. I get outside and take some pictures as Kevin is legging it, getting as much speed as possible, driving through there. Get about 3/4 of the way to the deepest spot. Our car stalls as well, like the Micra. But of course it wouldn't start again. So at first it's funny. We laugh about it. Yeah, this is hilarious. Kevin, all of a sudden his feet are getting wet and he couldn't open the door yet because of the water pressure. So he climbs out through the window and all of a sudden he's getting a bit more panicky, and I'm still taking pictures of it. I think it's bloody hilarious. And he starts saying, "Oh my God, the water level's rising. Everything's getting wet in here." And all our travel guides were on the floor behind the front seats, and they were all rinsed. My phone was lying on the passenger seat, which I thought would be safe. Nope, it was not. Very quickly, the water kind of forced its way in and built up in the car. Pretty much to the bottom of the steering wheel.
And then how did you get it out?
That wasn't that easy, actually. So on the other side of the river, the bank was quite steep. So you couldn't, the Micra couldn't get very close to the river to tow us. So we joined up all the tow ropes that we had, but it still wasn't enough. And that's when Kevin had the genius idea of cutting out the seat belts in the back of our car and using them to extend the tow rope. So we used those, and the Micra was able to pull us out. When we're outside again, we cleaned, we drained the entire air intake and got as much water out of it as possible, but it wouldn't start by itself anymore. Something broke our starter motor, but we could still bump start the car, so that was fine. And that's how we made it to the finish line for the last 7 or 8 days or something like that without a working starter motor. So whenever we stopped the car at borders you have to do quite a lot, we had to push start it again to get it going.
Wow.
So we got quite a good routine in the end of finding parking spaces that were on slopes to make the pushing and the going easier for us.
Wow. It sounds like you got a very good collection of adventure stories from the trip.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The time just flew by just because so much was happening.
What were some of the best moments? The least challenging and the other side of the coin.
Okay, the other side of the coin. Lots of great nights in the desert, camping with other teams, smoking shisha, watching the stars, cooking over camping stoves, and then also the next morning, waking up in the middle of nowhere in the desert with no one else around you, I think is great. The serenity that you get. I'm quite an early riser, especially compared to my teammate Kevin. So I had a couple of mornings of just getting up, sitting on the roof of my car, reading in the sunrise. That's incredibly serene.
Mm-hmm.
We also had a lot of great interaction with locals. Whenever we had downtime, wherever we were, they would just flock to us because the nature of not having a lot of tourists. Sharing food. We had so much watermelon offered to us in Turkey. We had a great family that we stayed with in Iran who fed us, who took us to their tea factory and their bakery, and were incredibly nice to us. We were just basically overwhelmed by hospitality everywhere along the way. The amount of backgammon I played with people was incredible.
Did you have a backgammon board with you, or is that just really popular in the area?
Well, it is really popular, and knowing that I brought a little, or actually my friends gave it to me for my birthday, a little rolling up travel backgammon set, which came out whenever we had an opportunity to. We also had a shisha with us in the car, which was really popular in Iran, sort of the kind of more Arabic countries. But as soon as you're after Iran, a lot of people didn't know what it was, and it was a nice novelty to share with them, actually.
Yeah.
So there was one evening where we crashed our car in Turkmenistan. I say we, this is Kevin driving, but I have to say we because we're a team clearly. No, it's in his defense, it was a very, very wide road, which looked like a main road, but all of a sudden there was a smaller road coming from the side that had the right of way. So we T-boned a car that was going past. There was a lot of instant negotiation. We had insurance, but nothing gets done on insurance in those countries. So it was $400 to the other car to pay them off. It was a nice Mercedes, and they needed new doors and a lot of other stuff fixing. Then we got towed to a mechanic, who then for around $400 more repaired a car that would have been a definite write-off in any Western country. The entire engine bay was warped, fuel line was ruptured, radiator was leaking, doors wouldn't open anymore, chassis was just not aligned, basically. And overnight, he fixed it up. But where I was getting at, actually, is because it gave Kevin and me a great downtime sitting in a nice shaded courtyard in the back in Turkmenistan, where everything was boiling hot. It was sort of 42 degrees Celsius. I don't quite know what that's in Fahrenheit, but hot.
Yeah, I haven't
basically
figured out Fahrenheit yet either. So.
And we were sitting there watching the repairs, constantly getting fed, speaking to the kids of the mechanic and the rest of the family with our little phrase books as much as we could. That was a really great day.
How do you go about finding a mechanic in Turkmenistan?
So as soon as we crashed, within about 5 minutes, there was a flock of 40 people around us, and before you know it, every side. Both the car we crashed into and us, we had our team of like 5 dedicated advisors, and they would barter for us and kind of they took sides fairly quickly and helped us sort of arrange an agreement. And one of them subsequently towed us to a mechanic that he knew that was just around the corner as well.
Huh. So it's just like
so it was actually incredibly easy.
Yeah, they're looking for that opportunity.
Exactly. They all got some money out of it as well. Let's face it here. At the end, when they were done with their services, they very quickly held up an open hand, demanding a couple of dollars here or there, but very happy to pay, to be honest. It was a great help. And to be fair, not everyone did that. There were a lot of people who went above and beyond what they had to do. We got a lot of free repairs along the way. We got a free sump guard from a metal merchant in eastern Turkey somewhere. I forget the town, in Bingöl. It was incredibly nice, with also a dedicated team of people walking around this like car part area with us, helping us sort everything out. Just basically wherever we went, we proved quite popular, and that made breaking down very easy.
And so once you get to the finish, what do you do with the car?
So some teams decide to drive the car back. Ours was not in that state, and also we didn't have enough time. So the car's going to get scrapped, which is sad. We took some parts with us. I've got the radiator grill, which is cracked and broken down the middle, left and right of my TV in the living room, and a couple of other bits and bobs, I think, on the wall behind me. But the kind of the weird issue about this is that Russia has an incredibly high import tax on cars, and if you want to scrap your car in Russia, you also have to pay this import tax, which is a couple of $1,000s. So it's actually cheaper to put the car on a train, ship it to, I want to say, Latvia or Estonia maybe, and have it scrapped there, than having to pay the import duty to have it scrapped in Russia, which seems incredibly counterintuitive, but that's the official way of doing it. The unofficial way of doing it is to just miraculously have an accident just after you reach the finish line, which totals your car or torches it, or somehow it bursts into flames. So something or other happens, which then gives you a legit excuse to leave it behind without having to pay this import tax.
I imagine like you also could probably just just leave it.
Yeah. Well, technically, when you are leaving the country, they see that you entered with a car. they then might want to stop you and say, where are the papers, why isn't the car with you, that sort of thing. But in practice, I haven't heard of any other teams get in trouble with that. I guess for us, Kevin and I were quite good guys at the end of the day, so we were happy to pay the couple of £100 to have the car shipped out of Russia and then scrapped. It was all organized. So this is one of the things that the rally actually organized for us. So at the finish line, there were a couple of people there who were waiting to take our cars and sort it all out. So we took them up on that, basically because it's the legal route, and honestly the trip was adventurous enough as it is.
So what was it like when you get to the ending stages, day of finishing? How did that feel?
Oh, really, really bizarre. It's you get so used to sitting in this car. You get so used to each other driving with my friend Kevin. It was really weird all of a sudden having to say goodbye to him, and kind of feeling that loom. You become very close and very used to each other quite quickly, especially if you go through an adventure. You bond a lot, I guess, if you're in exciting circumstances. Then it was really surreal. We arrived at the finish line very early in the morning, having driven the night through. This is our second time we had to do that, just to catch our flight out of Irkutsk. The finish line itself was on a big square that was completely empty at that time in the morning. We arrived at about 7, so we took some pictures of the car on the finishing line ramp, and then kind of just stuck around and waited and watched the square fill up with people who were setting up for some other festival there. Some other rally teams arrived, the organizers arrived, and then it was very surreal when kind of Kevin drove off with them in a convoy to a parking lot outside of the city center where all the rally cars were waiting to die, basically. It was a bit of a graveyard situation. Had one last burger and a pint in a pub there with a couple of other rally teams who we convoyed with, made our goodbyes, and then kind of left.
Yeah. And then were you back at work 4 days later or something like that?
I had a couple of days in Moscow in between, because the flight back from Irkutsk had to go via Moscow anyway, which was a really nice way to actually ease back into civilization. Having been in the middle of nowhere and in deserts, it was nice to be in a big city with infrastructure and ATMs and bars, basically, having a bit more of a normal sort of hostel life again. Really like Moscow, by the way. This isn't really the focus of the rally, but if you have a chance, go. I absolutely loved it. Just for being a very good functioning city that also is incredibly rich in history and very interesting history as well. So yeah, I had a couple of days there to kind of ease myself back into civilization, which I think really, really helped. So then by the time I made it back to London, I still had, I actually didn't have a day here, but it was fine. It wasn't as much a shock.
Yeah, it'd be weird feeling because you go through this kind of crazy adventure, and then, everyone else at work has probably just been doing their thing. Nothing crazy has happened. It's just been a month, and then you're back, and it must have a bit surreal feeling.
Oh yeah, and I had to go through the story quite a lot with all of my colleagues, basically, and all of my friends for the weeks after. So I think at some stage I got quite good at just summarizing in about 45 seconds the highlights of the rally, so I could get on with my life again.
Yeah. I guess it's a lot more interesting for coworkers than a trip to Spain or something.
Oh yeah. Also, a really nice thing of going via Moscow for a few days. I had a chance to properly get clean again. So you must have seen the picture of me on the finishing line.
Yeah.
My face is so dirty after 4 weeks of driving through the desert in Mongolia, not showering and just legging it up to the finish line as quickly as possible, fighting a broken fuel pump. That's what ended us up on the truck for 700 kilometers. Was really quite rough. So by the time we got there, that's kind of one of the things that made the finish line so surreal as well, because it was such a last minute push with stuff going wrong literally right up to 2 days before we had to be there. We were really quite out of it and really dirty. It was nice to have a couple of days in Moscow to recover. before getting back to civilization.
Yeah. Would you do it? Would you do it again?
Um, Question, actually. I don't know if I would. I wouldn't do the same trip again, probably, simply because I've done it. But I would definitely recommend people to do the trip. It was great.
Yeah, when I saw you were doing it and started watching videos about it, I was like, oh, I need to do this sometime.
Yeah, you definitely should. It's such a good adventure. It's so much fun doing it with other people there. All the other ralliers are incredible. 99% of the people we met along the ways were so hospitable, wanted to learn more about us. They all called us crazy for what we were doing. And it was only sort of in Mongolia, when we were telling people about our trip and it was nearly done, that they actually realized, oh, wow, you did this. Congratulations. Up until then, people were just calling us crazy. You're never going to finish. It's never going to work. So we proved them wrong. It's definitely an endless supply of adventure stories. It's a great way of broadening your horizon to see to different cultures, to lots of other new people, and it's little things about the rally which I thought worked really well. So, for example, having really bad cars, none of us had air conditioning, so we always drove with our windows down, which made you instantly much more approachable, and you were able to interact with people on the street, just waving out or just giving high fives as you're driving past, or silly stuff like that. So, as a traveling experience, I think the rally was great, and it's a really good format. It works.
Yeah, and it's a part of the world too where it's not your typical alluring vacation spot. So, but it's like anywhere you go, it's interesting, but it turns this thing that's like so foreign and remote in your mind, and you have like no idea what it is. It's just based off some like weird assumptions from like news you've seen, but like to make it real must be pretty cool.
Definitely. Are you going to do it then?
I don't know. My thought was like, oh, this looks awesome, but I don't know. No mechanical skills.
Hey, I didn't have any either.
Yeah, and you made it out alive. Has anyone died?
Yes, I think a couple of years ago there was a car crash, which had some fatalities. And this year there was one car crash as well that ended two Dutch guys up in hospital, both with spinal and neck fractures. They hit a camel actually in Mongolia, which is where one of the rules comes from. One of the unwritten rules that you definitely shouldn't drive at night because it actually is really dangerous. So we're really lucky that both of those guys are out of any more serious trouble. It was quite difficult for them to get the medical attention that they needed, just by nature of being in Mongolia, where even once they were flown to the capital city from where the crash happened, the hospital still didn't have the right skill set and the right just resources to deal with them properly. So they were subsequently flown to, I want to say, Hong Kong or maybe Singapore, to a good hospital there before then being relocated back. So there are a couple of sad stories, and the joking stops as soon as someone's health gets affected. A couple of people got concussed with various crashes or getting hit by boot lids, which in the middle of the desert also isn't very great. But all that being said, that's a very small minority of people that are actually affected by that. And if you think there's probably about 100 teams that did it this year, with probably 3 people on average per team. Of the 300, I know of 2 that had a more serious incident. I think that's actually a fairly decent stat considering the adventure that we're going through.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to be aware of what can happen, as with driving in your home country as well, I guess. Just by nature of sitting in a car for so long, road accidents are quite likely. But I really hope that doesn't put anyone off, because if you only have the slightest bit of adventure, you will happily take those odds to be able to go on a trip like that.
What do you think? Did you take away any life lessons from the trip? Anything you think about regularly? Maybe a sense of gratitude?
What did I take away from the trip? I think I took away a couple of practical lessons. To always share food. It is the quickest way to make friends. It becomes really obvious when you're in the middle of nowhere, but I think it's also a lesson that works in Western society as well. Just if you're at a business meeting or for any other reason, share food. It's a really good way to get talking with people. I mean, it's probably a pretty obvious one, but the rally kind of highlighted it to me. And to learn to trust people. People are the ones that we met, at least, were all incredibly nice to us. Even when it was trying to find a place to change money in Iran somewhere. And we went to an exchange booth that was in the travel guide, and it had shut already. But there were a couple of people in the store next to them so that told us to come with them. We got in a car with one of them who drove us for a quarter of an hour across the city, just to his friend who he knew also exchanged money. Where we went, we had our cash exchange, and he drove us back and dropped us off right where we started. But this guy clearly knew we had a lot of cash on us. We were looking to exchange money and had every opportunity to be a lot worse for us. But we just chose to trust him, and it paid off. It was great.
So now you think you're a bit more trusting of the average person?
I think so, yeah. Definitely a bit opener to new people, or quicker to trust new people, I think.
Yeah, and I imagine you'd come away with a lot more feeling of efficacy, just like going through this experience and facing challenge after challenge and knowing that you can handle whatever comes your way.
Yeah, I guess it does give you a bit of a confident boost if you know you actually made it that far. Having had the adrenaline rush of being held at gunpoint by the Turkish army, being stuck in the middle of the Gobi Desert with no other cars around, and then kind of keeping a calm head, trying to hunt for errors yourself, despite not having any clue about car mechanics, or then just having to endure sitting in your car on the back of this lorry, being shaken around, which is completely outside of your control and a lot more unpleasant than it might sound, actually, I have to say, just because it was for such a long period of time. I think, that definitely goes to build your character and to kind of make you a lot cooler.
Yeah.
I feel the next time I have to negotiate something, it's going to be a breeze, because it's going to be nothing like the time when I had to make sure that a mechanic would fix our car, and I was writing numbers on the windscreen of a dirty car that was parked nearby, and just negotiating with hands and feet.
Yeah, or then like when you get stressed out about something, like it's kind of like a day-to-day small thing, and you stop for a second, you're like, why am I stressed about this? Like, this isn't nothing compared to that time. I thought we were going to drown in the river or something like that.
Yep. So I think for that, sort of to build your mind in that sort of way, it's really, really good. And I guess if you just go traveling, either for short holidays or if you have a longer backpacking trip, depending on where you go, sometimes, especially in South America, there's quite a good hosteling infrastructure already. And actually, most of the people will speak English, or you just have to learn one language. You just have to learn Spanish, and then you can kind of cover or converse with most people. Those are benefits that are taken away from you when you're on this rally, because you're going to places that get absolutely no tourism. Lots of people speak different languages. You can just try to communicate as much as possible with body language and pointing at things. So in terms of an adventure, it's definitely up there as one of the very fun ones, and actually fairly obtainable ones, that being said as well. It's not outrageous, I think, at least, to sign up for it and complete the trip if you have a bit of determination in you, and make sure to always have a couple of small dollar bills in a pocket that's easily accessible. then you're going to be fine, and you're going to have a great adventure.
Well, awesome. It's really a pleasure talking to you more about it. Maybe I'll have to catch up with you next year before I go off on my trip to Mongolia. Maybe not next year. Maybe like 2017.
2017? Why wait? Why wait, man? Yeah. Sign up now.
All right. Thank you, Felix.
Very welcome.
All right, I hope you guys enjoyed listening to that as much as I enjoyed being part of the conversation. Every time I talk to Felix, I'm really impressed with not just the things we're talking about, but the fact that he's actually German, but speaks English better than I do. Kind of makes me feel a little bit bad. But anyways, if you want to find out more about the Mongol Rally and see some photos, you can go check out the show notes on theworldwanders.com. As always, we love to hear from you guys. If you are thinking about doing the Mongol Rally yourself now, we'd love to hear it. You can connect with us on the website or on Facebook. Just look for The World Wanderers. Anyways, I hope the rest of your day is amazing and spectacular and fantastic. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the show, and see you soon.